More than 6 years after the police killings of Michael Brown and Eric Garner, 7 months since Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd, and with the deaths of far too many other black men and women before, between, and since, state lawmakers are finally making progress on a police reform bill in our state. After 4 long months of closed-door negotiations over separate plans each chamber passed over the summer, the Senate signed off late this afternoon, and as of this taping, the House has yet to vote. The 129-page bill would create a 9-member commission responsible for licensing all law enforcement officers and overseeing misconduct investigations, even if the officer hasn't been formally charged with a crime. The commission would also have the power to pull an officer's license in several instances, and it would be made up of a combination of people from law enforcement backgrounds and civilians. In addition, the bill would ban chokeholds, set limits on the use of tear gas, no-knock warrants, facial recognition technology. It would introduce criminal penalties for officers who knowingly submit fraudulent timesheets and set clear standards for police use of force. Officers would also be required to intervene if they see another officer using excessive force. As for what was perhaps the biggest sticking point between the two versions, addressing so-called qualified immunity, the compromise went with the House version. This means officers would lose the legal protection they have now, which shields them from certain individual lawsuits only if the new commission pulls their license. The Senate version had gone much further and would have allowed lawsuits if the officer should have reasonably known that his or her conduct broke the law. Neither version would have eliminated it. Of course, it's not law until both chambers pass it and the governor signs off, and already police unions are pushing for a veto. I'm joined now by State Senator Sonia Chang-Díaz, who was part of the 6-member committee which negotiated the compromise, and State Representative Russell Holmes, who's been advocating for police reform since long before George Floyd, sadly, became a household name. Senator, Representative, good to see you both.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Senator, I heard on Twitter about a half hour ago a little bit of your floor speech praising the thousands of people who took to the streets demanding reform. In your estimation, did they get what they wanted out of this compromise?
Look, Jim, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. No one got everything that they wanted. I didn't get everything I wanted. Maybe Russell got everything he wanted. But there were things that protesters were asking for that are not included in this bill. You mentioned qualified immunity reform, strong qualified immunity reform is one of them. But that should not take away from protesters feeling that they were heard and responded to by this legislation. This is some first in the nation stuff that we are doing in this bill that is really significant, that is going to be landscape changing and culture changing in law enforcement, most especially the post board that we're creating. And huge hat tip to Russell here for laboring in the vineyards for so many years on post reform. But this post body is going to, the Police Officer Standards and Training, to not just use the acronym, is going to combine for the first time in any state true authority, subpoena power, decertification power, proactive monitoring and oversight power, combine that with community voice at the governing table. And there are states that have done one or the other, but not both at the same time.
Representative Holmes, you have been at this longer than just about anybody in Beacon Hill. How satisfied are you with the outcome?
I'm very satisfied, Jim. I would like to now see the House pass the bill with a veto-proof majority. When you think about what's happening just over in the Senate, to only have 28 votes, I'm disappointed with that, and now I'm quite curious about what's going to happen over the next hour. And so, again, Jim, I began with you need to listen to black people, you need to listen to Latino people, and our cornerstones of the bill are certainly in it.
But did they listen to you? The one thing that you said that I found most persuasive of the many times we talked is you said if you're stopped by a cop in the future, you want to be able to look at his or her badge, pick up your cell phone, type in that badge number, and find out job history, complaints filed against him or her. Under this post commission, will you be able to do that, Representative?
Well, this is not even part of the commission. This is just a requirement, not just about pull you over. If I'm just walking down the street and see your name and your badge, I'll understand that, yes, I can have a public-facing database that will now allow me to know your background just like we do every other profession. That was a must, and it was definitely in the bill.
You know, Senator, on that note, though, and I think that's important to a lot of people, this database thing. It's, to me at least, the central part of this. I was reading through some of the language, though, and it said when the regulations are being promulgated for this database, the health and safety of officers has to be considered. I assume a lot of officers are going to say, if Russell Holmes gets the information he wants for himself and his constituents, the health and safety of an officer is going to be at risk. Is that going to compromise the thing that Representative Holmes has fought for forever?
Well, look, there's two things that are guarding against erosion of that database that you're talking about, Jim. One is that the legal language is very clear in the bill, which hopefully with the governor's signature will become law, that there are things that have to be included, that have to be publicly available in the database, in the public-facing database, and that includes any offense that has been substantiated and that the post has acted on. So anyone who's been required to undergo retraining, has had their certification suspended, or had their certification revoked, that must be in there.
How about a complaint?
If the complaint is not substantiated, it will not be public-facing.
But Jim, I guess.
That's right.
For me, I guess the thing.
Let me also say, the other thing that I think is going to guard against what you're talking about, Jim, of the sort of, is it going to get watered down, again, is the membership of the governing board of the Post. And that is why it was, something that was so important to get right in this bill, because they will have substantial regulatory power. And that's why we need to make sure that we have community voice at that table.
Representative,
what I was going to say, Jim, is just simply, the way I read that language is something to be fair. And that is, we certainly don't want the address of a police officer or something of that nature that might put their lives in danger to be in the list. But all the things that should be relevant to the senator's point are the things that I cared about most and my constituents care about most.
You're not worried about complaints. You're not worried about complaints alone not being available to the public,
right? Because remember, I live in a profession also that people can complain any day, but you have to still have it proven. And so I still want to make sure that they've proven that it was actually legitimate.
You know, Senator, you said a minute ago you hope the governor signs it. I'm sure you've heard this. This is a piece of what the governor had to say today about the legislation.
We're still reviewing it, until we have a chance to actually read the thing, which, we haven't even talked to our own lawyers about it yet. I'm not going to comment beyond that to say that I'm glad that the legislature moved forward on this.
So we don't know where he's going to go. And Representative, while you said you were disappointed only 28 votes in the Senate, doing math, that is a veto-proof majority, I believe.
Right.
The House did not have a veto-proof majority when it passed the original version. Is it going to have a veto-proof majority by the end of the night?
Well, I'm certainly hoping that there's been enough arrangements done within the negotiations that it does. But let me also comment about just the governor. I heard Bruce Tarr commenting that there was the letter that the caucus wrote, and we should have only done the things in the letter as though those are the only thing the caucus talked about. I've been in conversation with the governor, and certainly he and I have had conversations about these rights that they were so concerned that police officers are going to have taken. But if you look at why they're going to have their rights taken, they are literally, like you mentioned, that you falsify a timesheet, that you lie under oath, that you go and change and do something or tamper with evidence. Those are real reasons that really violate the trust of the public, and they should be held accountable.
Can we just spend a minute on qualified immunity? Because a lot of people didn't know it existed. You were candid about it, Senator, a minute ago. The weaker version, the House version, was chosen. At the other extreme, there are people like Senators Markey and Warren and D.A. Rollins and Congresswoman Presley who wanted it eliminated. Did you both support elimination of qualified immunity at the beginning of this process? Senator, starting with you.
I did. It was not.
Why is it not in the law, in the bill?
Look, making compromises is in the very nature and essence of a conference committee process. If I'd had it to write myself, we would have kept the stronger qualified immunity reform in. But in order to get a bill out and done and into law by the end of this session that includes really meaningful other things, it was a compromise that we needed to make.
Representative, are you content with, were you in favor of eliminating qualified immunity? Are you content with the state of affairs in the bill on that?
So to your point, Jim, before this began, I had never heard the words qualified immunity put together. And so that was my point when I've had these conversations with you in the past. So I'm satisfied that we at least landed on making a change and now studying to see what makes sense. I can tell you we've heard many ideas, but now let's spend the next couple of months trying to figure out what is the right next step.
You know, you both know that the Massachusetts Coalition of Police issued a statement yesterday through their president and said, in part, we now know that process has ended in the same way it began, with law enforcement professionals who protect the citizens of the Commonwealth each day being disregarded, dismissed, and disrespected. The bill as written simply goes too far in micromanaging police operations, establishing new protocols that will create dangerous situations and bring harm to not only police officers on the job, but the public as well. They seek to punish police for being police. Senator Chang-Díaz, how do you respond to the Mass Coalition of Police?
I respond in the same way that I did when the bill was first coming to the floor in the Senate, which is with an analogy. When I first came into office, one of the first bills that I voted on was an ethics reform bill, tightening the standards for ethics regulations on elected officials like myself. And I voted for that bill, not because I believe all politicians are bad, horrible people, categorically, right? But because I believe in the profession. I believe it's an honorable and important profession for us to uphold the public trust. It's essential to this work. And the same is true of law enforcement. It's a really important job. And it's because it's so important, it is also really important that there be trust between law enforcement officers and the people that they protect and serve, and they're supposed to protect and serve. And we have to rebuild that trust. So, you know, I don't think there's anything disrespectful to police about saying, look, if you falsify if you tamper with evidence, if you intimidate a witness, if you engage in a hate crime, if you fail to intervene when you see a fellow officer engaging in abusive force, then you should not carry a gun and a badge, right? We're not saying anything else about you, but just that you should not carry a gun and a badge. That's it.
Representative, last 30 seconds. As I said at the beginning, you've been at this for, I think, longer than anybody on Beacon Hill. How does it feel today, assuming the vote tonight goes as you wish?
Well, Jim, I'm going to simply say it feels great that we've finally gotten here. But the disappointing part is that we've gotten here literally on the lives of Black people. And so there's a great sense that we've accomplished something that we hope that we can now use as a model across this country. But you have to just realize, after decades and decades of Black people saying this has been happening in our communities and been ignored, it is great that we finally have gotten here.
Representative and Senator, thank you much for your work and thank you much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a great night.